Now from CBS News Miami, surviving and thriving, living with Parkinson's.
I'm the guy who really doesn't get sick. And here I am, with this diagnosis that I don't really know what to do with it. And I know for a fact that I was diagnosed with this, that I have it, that I'll live with it, and I'll be okay. I have my husband, I have my friends, my family. I'll be good.
Hello everyone, I'm Ted Scouten. Recently, I got some life-changing news. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. It's a progressive neurological disorder where symptoms can become more severe over time. I'm one of about 1 million Americans living with this. The way I like to say it, surviving and thriving. About 90,000 people a year in the U.S. are diagnosed with Parkinson's. That's enough to fill the Rose Bowl Stadium. It's more common in men than women. It's more prevalent with white and Hispanic people. And usually it strikes individuals who are in their 60s. For the next half hour, we're going to dig deeper into Parkinson's and its impacts. When this came into my life, I didn't know what to do, so I began a video journal. It's been my way of kind of getting it all out when I'm having a moment. If I'm flexing, so I go like this with my right arm, I can do it, and it's like a normal flex. When I do it with my left arm, that happens. I'm not doing that on purpose. This is my new normal, one I document frequently. But then every now and again, I kind of sit back and go, wow, you have Parkinson's disease. You have something that's going to impact the rest of your life. The rest of my life. But having Parkinson's disease won't define it. It's just changing it. Well, it's 1:56 in the morning, and here I am, awake. It was about 1.5 years ago when I began to notice that something was wrong. Flat feet, they're also going to talk about, my arm wasn't swinging like it's supposed to, and then I had some weird things going on with my fingers. I was having trouble typing. A couple of my fingers just weren't cooperating. Eventually, I headed to my doctor. From there, I went through a bunch of tests early on, and finally one called a DAT scan. This is my DAT scan.
Yeah.
What are we seeing?
In this little area right here, you see this colorful area here. The hotter it is, meaning the brighter it is, the more dopamine activity there is there. So this is the problem right here.
The first neurologist I turned to was someone I've known for years, a former CBS Miami colleague now on staff at Memorial Healthcare. Dr. Sean Caniff saw some concerning signs.
It was easy for me to judge that something was a little bit wrong. You seem to be moving a little bit more slowly on the left side of your body, and when you walked, there was a decreased arm swing in your left arm, and you had complained of tremor, which is one of the core features of Parkinson's disease.
Pull it open. I'm on a medicated patch now to help control my tremors. It's what you can't see when I'm on TV, but it's there.
I'll do that again.
My left arm shakes. On Monday, I had a tremor during a live shot. It started before my live shot, continued throughout the entire live shot, and ended after the live shot. So it was several minutes, and it was the longest one I've had so far. While I can't stop the progression of Parkinson's, exercise can slow it down. One thing my doctor told me is that I need to exercise a lot. He said, you need to sweat.
So we 100% can tell everyone who comes in the room who is diagnosed with PD, if you exercise, your disease will go slower than if you did not, 100%.
Dr. Adeshem Huck is a Parkinson's expert at University of Miami's Miller School of Medicine, and he works with the Parkinson's Foundation. He's encouraged with current research.
I think there's objective evidence for believing that we're getting closer than we ever did before.
He said the Parkinson's Foundation PD gene testing and research program gives some game-changing information.
The fact that we can test a person's genes allows us to identify those things that might allow us to make a personal difference for them, because their genes tell us about their Parkinson's disease.
And then that allows you to get medication geared toward that.
Personalized treatment, yes.
Life is not promised. You never know what's coming up. And I'm not quite sure what I want to say, except that I'm trying to live life as fully as I can.
And joining me now is Deborah Flynn. She is living with Parkinson's. Thanks for joining us, Deborah.
Thank you,
And also Parkinson's expert, Dr. Edeshem Huck, with the University of Miami's Miller School of Medicine, our Parkinson's expert. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's begin with Deborah. Deborah, when we tell someone that we have Parkinson's, usually one of the first questions they have is, how did you know? Mm-hmm. How did you know?
Well, I started seeing a tremor in my right hand, and then my husband noticed when I was jogging that I didn't move my right arm. My right arm didn't swing with me when I ran.
And what did you think when he said that? I mean, did it surprise you?
It did surprise me, and I actually thought it probably had something to do with the fact that I have a really bad back, and so I was probably favoring my right side. The tremor started to be a concern to me when I first noticed it.
When you got that tremor, was that kind of your clue that, hey, I need to get this checked out?
Mm-hmm. It was.
And when you first went to get things checked out, turns out they said that it was menopause.
Well, it was the 10 years leading up to the tremor. There were other symptoms going on that were being attributable to menopause, but the tremor got people's attention, and then I got to a neurologist at that point.
You know, I think a lot of people think of Parkinson as a tremor.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole disease.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more to it, and you have a good analogy here.
I do. I think about, and I saw this once some time ago, and I've adopted it. I think of Parkinson's like a volcano island. Like 20% of it is above the water, and that's what you see, like the tremor or balance issues, etc. But the other 80% is what people don't see, the, sleep deprivation, constipation, dystonia, things of that nature.
Okay, Dr. Huck, some of these symptoms, there's the common symptoms, which, first talk about what are the common symptoms.
Sure, no, thank you. First, that's a great analogy, because so much of what goes into experiencing Parkinson's disease is there for years before anyone knows the condition actually is what it is. So as you said, tremor is what we think of with Parkinson's disease, but as you touched on, sleep issues, yelling in your sleep, calling out in your sleep, that often precedes the physical symptoms by years. Things like depression, things like constipation, things that could be from 1,000 other things, and usually are often the early signs of Parkinson's disease as well. That's important both because we need to recognize what we can help our patients with. And so we don't want to focus on just the movement symptoms. Those are important, but also all these other things also help determine how a person feels. But also, if we could only recognize Parkinson's was beginning earlier, we'd have more of a chance to affect it.
I think with so many of us, when we look back, we realize that our symptoms started years ago. Mm-hmm. You were saying 10 years ago. I think mine were maybe 5 years ago when I was noticing I was getting dizzy. I was when I was exercising and I was doing a downward dog or a plank, my arm would shake. Mm-hmm. When should people know it's time to go get checked out?
Right. It's tough because it is so easy to dismiss these things as minor things. Again, for folks who don't pop up with tremor, and 25% or so folks have a tremor, depending on the age group. Up to 25% don't have a tremor. Sometimes 50%, depending on the age of the group you're talking about. And for those folks, it usually is dismissed as, I pulled my shoulder, and honestly, that's what it's going to be 5 times out of 10. What you need to do, I guess, is see when things start to overlap with each other. When it's a bunch of different things, you don't have an explanation. You'll do no harm by checking in with your doctor to see what's going on. And if you don't feel like things are adding up and that things persist, you need to, I guess, keep pushing until someone hears you.
And I think you said it best, that we all need to be our best advocate. Mm-hmm. How is it that you're your own best advocate?
I have a number of things, but a couple that come to mind are, I make sure that whenever something is going on with me in the medical perspective, I touch base with my movement disorder specialist to make sure she knows that the knee doctor is going to be doing this to my knee, and then I push them to talk to each other so that they both understand what my having Parkinson's and having surgery means in terms of my medication. When's the most appropriate time for me to have that surgery vis-a-vis my medication? And if the doctors are talking to each other, then things go better for me.
One thing that I find myself doing is I take notes in between doctor's appointments. Mm-hmm. When I notice something going on, I'll jot it down on my phone. Then when I get to my doctor, I have this long list of things that I want to talk to the doctor about. Sometimes I feel a little bit guilty because it's such a long list, but what do you need from patients to be most effective?
I think the first thing is I would encourage patients not to feel guilty. It's your time, not our time. We're here to help take care of you. And so whatever is most important to you should be most important to us. Lists are awesome. They're great. We make them to keep in mind what we need to talk about. Patients should also. And that way we can make sure we address the things that truly matter to a person's care.
You know, and Deborah, there's so much more than just the physical things that happen, the motor, non-motor. There's also psychological.
Yes.
I mean, this kind of messes with your mind.
It does.
Talk about the impact of that.
It's as basic as when you wake up in the morning, you really don't know what, if any of these symptoms are going to manifest themselves. And then you worry about, is it Parkinson's or is it cancer? Or because, you just don't know. All of a sudden something is going on with you that hasn't gone on before. And then you think about the burden you are to your family, your friends, those kinds of things they just are emotionally disturbing.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you. Coming up, Parkinson's not only impacts the person living with it, but as Deborah was saying, the entire family. We'll talk more about that when we return. I think I'm having one of those moments where your brain starts to shoot forward. What am I going to be like in 5 years? What am I going to be like in 3 years? I don't know. And sometimes that gets the best of you for a little while. You get scared, you get anxious. You know, we all have those moments when we let fear and anxiety in. And fear and anxiety certainly were front and center with our next guest, Roman Frankel and his wife, Renata. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Huck, thanks for sticking with us. When you were first diagnosed, it was a misdiagnosis, a pretty serious one.
Well, initially, when I started having symptoms, I went to several neurologists that weren't sure what it was. They tested me, they scanned me from head to tail, CAT scan, MRI, X-ray, went to an orthopedist. They couldn't tell me what it was. And since a lot of neurological illnesses are diagnosed by exclusion, I went to a neuromuscular specialist who determined that it was ALS, so it was a motor neuron disease. And that was a pretty harsh diagnosis. As always, I didn't want to accept it, and I kept going for tests and different tests. And I know you mentioned that you've gone through the EMG and the
EEG?
The EEG was easy. The EMG,
simple.
The EMG, where the nerve conduction study, where they put the needles in you, went through that 5 times just to try to get the proper diagnosis. And it wasn't until we went to a doctor in Johns Hopkins University that said, I don't see it. And then we went to see just a random neurologist in the neighborhood who was affiliated with one of the local hospital systems, who asked me if I had a biopsy done. And I was thinking brain biopsy, no, but he meant a skin biopsy. And he gave me a kit. I went to a dermatologist. They did a study, a biopsy on my skin, and it turned out I was positive for a particular protein that's only noticeable in Parkinson's and another illness for which I had no symptoms.
When you first got that initial diagnosis of ALS, I mean, that must have been just frightening for your family. Renata, talk a little bit about that, kind of the ups and downs. So you had that happen, then it turns out it's Parkinson's. What is life like with the family as you're all dealing with this? This is something we all deal with.
To say that it was hard is to say nothing, really. We didn't really talk about it among our family, among the kids. We had a very strong support system in our parents, but our kids didn't know. You had to keep living normal, work, soccer tournaments, smile when you couldn't. It was a bit of a sense of relief, for sure, but in the back of your mind, you still think about the ALS community. You hope that there's going to be enough funding to find a cure for them, as well as for Parkinson's. You just have to keep going.
You know, with your family, this has changed a bit of the, I don't want to say the dynamic, but things that you do, things that the family enjoys. I remember you talking about you like to go skiing. That's not what you do anymore. Talk about the changes.
Well, we still go on the ski trips out to Colorado, but I'm not the one skiing anymore. The kids are doing the skiing. We're more doing it for them. I tried skiing this past year. it was a little difficult. So I just tried it out and said, okay, maybe I'm not there. I can't do it. There are other activities I used to, because my kids played soccer, I was a soccer coach for their youth teams. I can't go around the soccer field anymore and kick the ball around. It's not that easy. Do a little bit of walking, a little bit of jogging, but the coordination just isn't there anymore.
And your major symptom is your foot?
Drop foot and the non-swinging of my left arm when I walk. But also if I'm standing still, I lose balance. If I'm just standing up still, I lose balance. If I'm standing still, I need to start moving. I have freezing, where my leg doesn't move. I have to pause, take a deep breath, and then take that first step. And once I take that first step, I can just keep going and going and going.
You know, I think what we find too is that as you're progressing with Parkinson's, or as you're going down your path, you are hoping for the best, but at the same time you have to prepare, especially when you have a family, for maybe what's not the best. Mm-hmm. Talk about that a little bit.
You know, Parkinson's looks very different in every individual it affects, and we don't know what Parkinson's will look like for us, but you do think about your home. You know, we have stairs in our home. Do we need to make sure that our home will be wheelchair accessible? Medical coverage. We have to make sure that at all times we have adequate medical coverage so that Roman can go to his PT sessions and follow-up appointments. So a lot of things, a lot of thoughts go through your mind as you prepare for something that you really don't know what it will look like.
And Dr. Huck, if you will, when you're diagnosing Parkinson's, it's not just a simple test and say, you have Parkinson's. It's a process. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, no, in fact, we have to be very honest about what we're saying when we say we're making a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's at this point in time is still a clinical diagnosis, which is to say that there isn't a definitive test that tells you, aha, this is Parkinson's disease. Things are a thing by virtue of a certain level of proof. Right now, you know a person has Parkinson's disease when you take a piece of their brain at autopsy and see the typical changes. Everything short of that is a different level of probability. Now, there's a lot of cool science that has happened that is allowing us to be more certain than we could be just by looking at a person. But when you mentioned the skin biopsy, that's a really powerful tool in our arsenal now. There are things like DAT scans where you can look at sort of dopamine transport in the brain to get an idea of whether Parkinson's-like changes have happened. But in the end, the diagnosis currently is still made on the basis of looking at a person and seeing, for example, if they're stiff and slow, more on one side of the body than the other, and maybe they have a tremor and maybe not. So to circle back, we have to be honest about how definitive the diagnoses are, or rather aren't, when we first meet a person.
So there's several steps to it, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. You know, right now we can't stop the progression of Parkinson's disease, but you can slow it down. What's being done to develop more effective treatments and one day a cure? When we come back. And I found that with my coworkers, with my family, with reporters and photographers from other stations, my competitors, the kindness that people have shown, the care, the concern. It's really overwhelming to have them come up and hug you, ask you if you're okay. It means something. Certainly does. And welcome back. This half hour, we've looked at what it's like to live with Parkinson's. So what are we doing going forward to make a difference? I'm trying to raise awareness by highlighting people's experiences, telling their stories, letting people know that we are getting closer than ever to a cure. That brings us back to Dr. Huck. Maybe you can talk about what some of the promising research is out there right now.
There's so much, I almost don't know where to begin. I think the thing I'm most excited about is the fact that we are as far along as we are, that we are seeing drug trials for things like stem cells, for people with particular genetic disorders, for ways to slow the disease down, and also healthy lifestyle activities too, finally showing, you know, exactly how and the degree to which they provide their benefit. So I think the sheer breadth of it is enormous. But I think if I have to focus in on one thing, and I guess I do, it's our increasing ability to understand an individual's Parkinson's disease. We call it Parkinson's disease. Honestly, I wish we called it Parkinson's syndrome, because everyone has their own version of it. There are all these different kinds of things that in the end produce the picture that we identify as Parkinson's disease. And of course, each of those individual things potentially has its own way of preventing it, its own way of curing it. I think one key to that is to look at a person's genes. So knowing what goes into your Parkinson's, what particular protein pathways in you are affected, is a very powerful place to begin to look. So if I had to pick one thing, it's the fact that we can genetically type our patients now and look to all the things that will bring us.
With that PD gene therapy, that can actually help you to hone in on what medication or treatment's going to be best.
And I want to be clear, right? I wish we were talking about like genetic modification, where you could go in and actually change what a gene does someday, I am sure. But right now what we're doing is knowing that this is what you have, and therefore, yes, a personalized treatment, this is what we can do about it.
And what about PPMI?
Oh yeah, the Parkinson's Progressive Marker Initiative is a phenomenal effort that is gathering data from centers across the country and storing it for physicians, researchers to make use of it. Because one of the things about Parkinson's, which is good, but also tough for research, is Parkinson's is slow. Thank goodness Parkinson's is slow, but it also means that it takes a long time to see how something is going to go for a person. So if we could identify those biomarkers that tell us how a person is going to do, we'll be able to treat people better, and that's what the PPMI is helping us collect.
How hopeful are we of a cure coming up anytime soon?
Spectacularly, I think. It's always difficult because you don't know that it's happened until it's happened. But there's so much research and so much of a deeper understanding of Parkinson's that at any point in human history, I do think it's nearer than it ever was before.
And Deborah, let's go over to you. Both of you actually take part in trials and research. Deborah, talk about the one that's most exciting for you.
Well, in addition to the PPMI, which I participate in, I'm involved in a study right now wherein I wear devices that monitor my activity, my falls, and then I participate at another level in that study using an app called Empower, and it measures my gait, it measures finger tapping, tremors, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And Roman, you also are involved in research and clinical studies.
I'm involved currently in one study where they're seeing it's a medicine to help reduce the effects of dyskinesia for Parkinson's and for Parkinson's medications, which tend to have a side effect of dyskinesia. There's another study that we'll be joining soon where it sees if insulin can help the brain synapses, the brain take in the dopamine a little faster. And one more study is a genealogy study where I have a certain gene variant that with people that have this gene variant are more prone to develop Parkinson's, but my mother has the same gene variant with no symptoms. And my goal is to see if there's something they can find in the genealogy that will help future generations.
You know, one thing you brought up too is that in many cases, or sometimes, there's simply not enough participants taking part. And so then you never know.
Correct.
Talk about that.
Well, the two studies I was looking, one that I'm a part of, one that I'm going to be a part of, they need a certain amount of participants in order to confirm or confirm whether the medicine works or not. If they don't get the number of participants necessary, they will never have what's deemed a viable study, and therefore they can't go forward with their findings. So these studies, if you happen to have Parkinson's, contact the Parkinson's Foundation and find out about these studies, join these studies. They're using medicines that are already being used for other illnesses. It's not some newly developed drug. They're using medicines already used for other illnesses to see if they work for Parkinson's. And you can help yourself and future generations of people with Parkinson's.
Dr. Hunt, thoughts on that?
I think that's very well put. I think folks need to know that there is a whole world of research out there that could potentially benefit them and other people, and it's just a phone call away.
And Deborah, one thing I want to say before we leave, you do fundraising, which is very important to fund things, to fund cures and research studies. Talk about what you do, kind of a fun way to raise money.
So I came up with this idea in collaboration with a friend of mine to do a Pints for Parkinson's. So a local brewery is going to donate 20% of the proceeds So I'm getting all my friends and family, and even some coming in from Chicago, to come drink beer, and everything. And every dollar they spend goes towards Parkinson's research. It's being done in conjunction with the Parkinson's Foundation, and so I'm very excited about that.
Well, thank you so much. And Deborah Roman and Dr. Huck, thanks so much for sharing with us and learn more about how you or a loved one can not only survive but thrive with Parkinson's disease. We have more information for you on our website, cbsmiami.com. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.